Part 1 out of 6 of the Vincent Kennedy No Chance in Hell McMahon, aka Mr. McMahon docu-series down there to the Netflix. Let's be clear on something. Him having daddy issues was not on my bingo card. Know that. Was not on my bingo card. Now I can hear some of y'all now talk about what you mean he got daddy issues. So let me run it down to you. His story, this is how he tell it, and I've heard this before, but not to the extent of it coming out of his mouth. So up until he was 12 years old, he didn't even know his last name was McMahon. He didn't even know who his father was. He lived in a trailer park, trailer home with his mom and his abusive stepfather. Now, there's nothing wrong with living in a trailer park or a trailer home. These are really nice, and the trailer parks be looking real nice too. Ain't nothing wrong with it. But the part that's the issue is the abusive stepfather. So when he eventually meets his father, he's giving, "Oh, Papa, I'm your son. Oh, open arms." In the arms of an angel, and his father is giving like, "Oh yeah, I fathered that kid. How you doing, kid? Sup?" Side hug, all that. So yeah, daddy issues are all up and through. Now the part that has y'all wondering is if he had daddy issues, how'd he end up in the business? So he grows up and everything. He becomes an adult. He wants to get into the business. He wants to, be, from what I took from this, be around his father more, learn the business and everything like that. So he goes to work with his father, and the announcer at the time was like, "I'm not about to do my job if you ain't giving me no more money. I want more money to do my job." And Vince Sr. was like, in layman's terms, F that. Vince Jr., you're announcing, get out there. That's basically how this started. So, he had a few hiccups along the way, but then he really gets into, announcing because he brings more of an entertainment aspect to the announcing of what's going on in the ring. Now I can hear y'all saying, "Well, what about like the legal issues he's in?" They preface this when the docu-series starts that, hey, a lot of this was filmed long before, maybe a year or two before all his legal drama and all his legal issues really start to make waves and hit the media, and long before he quit and came back, quit and came back, quit and came back, retired, and then sold his shares. So know that we haven't even scratched the surface of a lot of stuff because this is only part 1. Now you're also wondering, now how did he get in charge of the entire company? So at some point in time, Vince Sr. was like, "I don't want to do this no more." So Vince Jr. wanted to take over, but you also had Gorilla Monsoon there too. Gorilla Monsoon had a few shares in the company. He had worked for Vince Sr. for a very long time. Eventually, it broke down into, Vince Jr. was robbing Peter to pay Paul to pay off his father for the business because nobody ever thought he would be able to pay his father the full amount for the business. He eventually did. Which made him the sole owner of the WWF, which then would become the WWE after, a teensy beensy little scandal. Okay? Now, Junior here had, high expectations of what pro wrestling could be. Oh, I'm sorry, sports entertainment, because he hates the word pro wrestling, even though it's like professional wrestling. Anyway, high expectations of what it could be and where he could go. And he was very much into the entertainment aspect of it all. He had him a little late night talk show. He did a little 1-2 on David Letterman at one point in time. He, factored in MTV into this whole thing of let's expand. They were expanding nationally. Now, Vince had, these ideas of grandeur, like we're going to expand, we're going to go national, we're going to take this all over the world, out of the US and in the US. But here's the issue. Back in the day, there used to be territories, and these were the territories. Now, I found this map. It could be more, but this is the map somebody came up with. And as you can see, there's the AWA, you have Stampede. There are so many territories that it's just like you don't go into anybody's backyard and, do whatever you want to do and not expect it to be issues. So as he's expanding and not letting people know he's coming into town, he's just doing whatever the hell he want to do. The people was telling Vince Sr., "Hey, your child keep this up and he gonna be at the bottom of somebody's lake or river or wherever they was trying to put him." Okay, basically the people, allegedly, from Vince Jr.'s mouth said he was gonna have, to be fitted for some cement shoes. That's what he had said. Now, the threat of being fitted for some cement shoes was not really an issue for him because he's like, we're still going to take this national. We're still going to do whatever we're going to do. And meantime, in between time, he's taking different top talent from all these different territories and using them in Madison Square Garden, which was the home of the WWF back then. And then as they started to travel around in other territories, he's bringing all these people who you really built their names, built their characters, were super successful in all these territories. He's bringing them back to town, but working for him. Once again, hella issues because let the people tell it. In a Dark Side of the Ring episode, Harley Race had an issue with this and came and, put the fear of God into some people. But once again, Vince ain't really worried about this. So we factor in the fact that, hey, he really wants to do entertainment. He wants this to be big. He wants this to be global. He wants to take over. So thus comes in the aspect of, let's do more entertainment. And we get into the MTV era of the WWF. Cyndi Lauper met Captain Lou Albano on a plane, and he eventually became and played her father, and the girls just want to have fun video. Then he would also appear with a slew of other wrestlers in the Good Enough video for the Goonies. If y'all don't know, go watch it. You will see a lot of wrestlers from back in the day that is just like, what are you doing here? So they have this whole deal with MTV because Cindy's there. They make this whole big thing, and that's when we get the Wendy Richter versus Moolah match, because Wendy is representing Cindy and Moolah is representing Captain Lou. Boom. Now we really into entertainment. They got shows on MTV, having a good time. His wife tells him, hey, maybe you should take a vacation. So instead of really taking a vacation, he's working, because as an entrepreneur, you don't really, take a day off. Like a regular 9 to 5, yes, you have time off. And, that Caucasian man, he pays on time, but you get your time off, you get vacation time. As an entrepreneur, you don't get that. So while he's on vacation, he's thinking about what's next for the business. And he comes back and he tells her, we're going to have this one big show once a year, and it's going to be like the Super Bowl. It's going to be the biggest wrestling sports entertainment event we ever put on. And she was like, so you really didn't take a vacation? And it's just like, girl, did you expect him to take a vacation? Once again, he's putting the middle finger up to the territories as he's doing this whole expansion and wanting this one big show. Now, at this point in time, we're on the road to WrestleMania. It wasn't called that back then, but that's what it was. We're on the road to WrestleMania. We're trying to do, make big money moves. We're doing interviews. We're having people come to, our different shows. We got Mr. T. He's going to be at WrestleMania because he's tagging with Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan has just made his return back, because if y'all didn't know, Hulk worked for Vince Sr. and Vince Sr. gave Hulk his name, but Hulk wanted to do movies, and Vince Sr. was like, you're a wrestler, you're not an actor, and if you go and do that movie, you're fired. Which then he went and did Rocky 3 and got fired, so he went back to the AWA, and then he eventually came back to the WWE. And that's a whole other thing, okay? But we got all these people trying to get in where they fit in, trying to see what's going on as we're on the road to WrestleMania. So in walks, reporter John Stossel, journalist, and, he's really trying to expose the business. Everybody thought he was there to get a day in the life of Hulk Hogan. He's really trying to expose the business. Hulk goes and snitches to Vince. Vince goes and talks to the boys, allegedly, and says, I really wish somebody would handle him. And then enters in Dave Schultz. Now, Dave walked up into the camera, and y'all can find this on YouTube, and him and John Stossel have a little back and forth verbally, and then he smacks the fuck out of John Stossel, not once but twice, causing permanent ear damage, from what John Stossel said. Now, let's be clear on something. The money to do WrestleMania was not there. They were robbing Peter to pay Paul, and they were down to like the last dime trying to put this show on. This was a make or break thing. So bad press was never going to be okay. It was never going to be good for them. So we don't need none of this bad press. So Mr. T and Hulk Hogan, they go on Richard Belzer's show. If you don't know who Richard Belzer is, that is Lieutenant Munch from SVU, aka Living Them. He was a comedian at the time. He had his own show. So we're going to go on the show. We're going to do press because we need to, get the hype up for WrestleMania. Once again, we're on the road to WrestleMania. So they go on the show, and Richard is doing what comedians do, like ripping people, and it's just like asking questions that, is like, is it real or not? Because once again, this whole thing, they try to make this whole aspect about it like everyone trying to expose the business, even though some of y'all had already exposed the business. Anyway, Hulk puts Richard in a front chin lock. Richard passes out. Richard hits the ground and cracks the back of his head. He wakes up long enough to go to commercial break, has to go to the ER and get 9 stitches in the back of his head, and bitch, we got lawsuits all over. So boom, we still on the road to WrestleMania. This is some bad press once again, and then also we have lawsuits. So John Stossel sued Mr. McMahon and Titan Sports. That's what, WWF, WWE, that's what they were called back then. And then Richard Belzer sued Hulk Hogan, Mr. McMahon, and Titan Sports. So it's just like, what are we doing? Now, both settled out of court, but we still on the road to WrestleMania. This has to go off without a hitch because too much money has gone into this, and it's just like, it's got to happen. We got to make it happen. And that was part 1. I'll be back for part 2. Now we got part 2 of the Vincent Kennedy No Chance in Hell McMahon, docuseries. It's 6 parts, so bear with me. Now they open it up with this scene of him singing and dancing and gyrating all around, and I'm sitting up here laughing at this like I did when I was a kid when I first saw it. Why would y'all do that when we about to get into some scandalous scandals? I just know the king of cable, Ted Turner, was like, these scandals is happening. WCW is gonna be on top. Believe that. I feel like that's what he said. Now, a good bulk of this part 2 was a lot of talking about Hulk Hogan and, Hulkamania and everything that was happening, and then all the scandals that were happening during that time. So let's run it down. WrestleMania 2 happened, logistically and production wise, disaster. Commercially, they made their money. Now, this is Jesse the Body Ventura. Now, Jesse the Body Ventura was there with the boys. He was a wrestler. He then went on to do commentary and announcing. But Jesse was there trying to unionize the boys before WrestleMania 2. And he was trying to get them health care and a slew of other things that you would expect to have when you work for, this corporate entity. However, it just didn't work out. It didn't work out because Hulk Hogan, being the number one guy for Vince McMahon at the time, instead of being with the boys, he went and ran and told, Vince, hey, they trying to unionize. You might want to go handle that. So, per the words of the boys who were in the locker room at the time that Jesse was trying to unionize and who were a part of this docuseries, after Hulk went and ran his mouth to Vince, Vince called the rest of the guys into, his office and was like, y'all trying to unionize? What's going on here? If y'all do that, then don't bother showing up to work. That's basically, in a roundabout way, what happened. No union. I see why the people that you used to work with feel the way they feel about you. So now we get to WrestleMania 3. We trying to do it bigger, better, way over the top. So Vince decides we're going to have it in Pontiac, Michigan. We're going to get Aretha Franklin to sing and, play them keys and do what she do best as the queen of motherfucking soul. And also, we're going to make this bigger and better and way over the top to sell these 93,000 seats. Okay? Because it was sold out, allegedly. Now, Dave Meltzer was there to fact check. He was like, what? No 93,000 seats sold. It was like 78. And in order to make this bigger and better and way over the top using Hulk Hogan, as the star he was at the time, we're also going to use Andre the Giant. Now, Andre the Giant was not wrestling at this time. He was off doing movies. He was living his best life. He had some back problems, so he was in pain. And they even said that on the set of The Princess Bride. He was in pain, so they had to be really soft with him. Now, Vince said he went and talked to Andre and said, we're about to do this bigger and better and way over the top. I need you to go ahead and have his back surgery so you can get back in the ring and do what you do best because you're about to draw the biggest house you ever drew. And, he said Andre agreed. So No Chance in Hell is like, we're going to sell this like, Andre and Hulk never met before, and that's how we're going to do it. And we're just going to, this baby face versus this big giant heel, right? Now, Hulk Hogan, this whole time WrestleMania 3 is happening, he's like, oh my God, I don't know what's happening. I don't know if I'm supposed to go over. I don't know if he's going to take care of me. All these things. Boy, please. Because Andre does exactly that. He takes care of him, he puts him over, and he makes Hulk Hogan even more of a star than he already was at the time. Now, once again, I told y'all, Dave Meltzer was here to fact check all this stuff. He was fact checking like nobody's business. WrestleMania 3 is over. Now we about to work Hulk Hogan like we've never worked him before. And what do you think I mean about them working him like they never worked him before? He's about to sell everything with the Hulkamania, Hulk Hogan, the colors, the name, all that on it. If they could have sold a mattress with Hulkamania printed on it and making the mattress in the colors of red and yellow, they would have done that. Now, Hulk Hogan had aspirations of going to Hollywood. Eventually his star started to dwindle and he had aspirations of going to Hollywood. So they tried to do a movie. It did not do well. It flopped. It was a flopiana. And it only stopped Hulk from going to, Hollywood for a little bit. Now, his star started to fade. He couldn't be on top forever. So he drops the belt, title, championship to the Ultimate Warrior because he's new, he's shinier, he's brighter, but the Ultimate Warrior weren't really into the whole wrestling aspect of it. So now we're about to bring in Sergeant Slaughter, and he's this big heel. He was once a babyface, but now he's partnered up with the Iron Sheik, and they gang up in here. Unfortunately, is where bad situations come in. What you mean bad situations? So he had the bright idea to take what was happening in the real world and bring it into the wrestling world like people typically do, as we see it in today's times. However, the issue with this is you have the Iron Sheik and, Sergeant Slaughter ganging, and then Desert Storm happens, and now Sergeant Slaughter is getting death threats. His children and his wife are getting death threats. So they try to speed this along and get this over and done with because, once again, issues were happening. Problems were happening. Now we got issues going on. Why? Because it's about to get into the steroids of it all. Now, boom, check this out. They had a doctor who was working for the WWF per him working for the Pennsylvania State Athletic Commission. He was supposed to be there to make sure the boys were okay. They were able to get in the ring. They were able to work. They weren't hurt. They weren't concussed. They weren't all these things that would stop you from working your 7 days a week for however many weeks y'all supposed to be on the road, right? However, at this time, Ronald Reagan had become president. There's a war on drugs. Steroids that were once legal have become illegal. Now it's a Class C substance, and the doctor is prescribing them, but he's also selling them. See the issue? See, like you can prescribe them because you're a doctor, but you can't sell them. Okay, illegal. And then you have people who are abusing it. So the doctor goes to jail, and the doctor go to jail. The doctor is telling all the business. Thus enters the man everybody got smoke in the city for, Phil Mushnick. Now, Phil Mushnick is a journalist. I forget if he was working for the New York Post or the New York Times, but he was like, well, I couldn't keep wrestling out of my everyday thing as I was working, so I started to, write about it and report on it. Now, once again, they got issues with Phil Mushnick. He said, Phil Mushnick tried to destroy my company, tried to destroy my life, and I don't know what his problem is with me. Phil said in the docuseries, because you're a dirtbag. That's what he said. Now, like I told y'all, the doctor went and told. Now, the doctor tells, and the doctor says, I prescribed him to this person, this person, this person, this person, and also I prescribed him to Hulk Hogan, and he was abusing him. Now, Phil Mushnick is reporting on it, everybody reporting on it, everybody talking about it. Vince has to go on a press conference and say, yes, I've taken steroids in the past. I didn't see the big problem with it, but that's neither here nor there. When you see the WWF logo, just know this is a place where everybody is clean and happy and healthy and all that stuff. So then he starts the wellness policy before the wellness policy before the wellness policy before the one that is currently in place. However, we got issues. Because the same day Vince had his press conference, Hulk Hogan decides to go down to the Arsenio show, and Arsenio asks him about, the steroids and everything, and he lies about it, even though Vince told him to tell the truth. So now it's really smoke in the city, because why are you lying when they got proof? Because when I say they got proof, I mean they got proof. All former wrestlers or people who once worked for the WWF came out and said, now you know damn well you lying, because we helped you do X, Y, and Z. Now, Phil was still writing stories about the WWF and professional wrestling and what was going on down there. And then Phil was getting tips from different people. And Phil has told Dave Meltzer, if I told you what was really going on, it would shut them down. Thus, we enter the Ring Boy scandal. Thus, we get into the Ring Boy scandal. I learned something new today. The Ring Boy scandal went like this. There was a ring general who hired ring boys who were typically high schoolers, minors, teenagers to help put up the rings and take down the rings at the, different events. Now, the ring boys were basically sexually harassed and told if they didn't do X, Y, and Z, then they wouldn't be brought back or they would be fired. And that's what happened. So this is Tom Cole. You know, he went and told his story. 1990, he was telling his story, and then we end up on Phil Donahue. What you mean we was on Phil Donahue? Yes, we was on Phil Donahue. Like, listen, Phil came in, there was a roundabout table. This was time for Vince to tell his side of the story, everything. Different people was coming out the woodwork saying y'all did this, X, Y, and Z, y'all covering stuff up. What you mean covering stuff up? Yeah, a lot of people feel like a lot of things that were happening behind the scenes in, the time of the 80s was, some serious stuff from assault, harassment, unaliving, steroid abuse, that Vince was covering it up. I just know that you was seeing all these scandals saying I'm about to take over professional wrestling. Quit playing with me. Now, Phil Donahue, like that segment with Vince on Phil Donahue, Dave Meltzer was there, other wrestlers were there, people who had worked for the WWF was there. This is supposed to be a time for Vince to tell his side of the story. It did not go the way he wanted it to, which, once again, more bad publicity. Now, scandals weren't over by a long shot as it pertains to this part two. This is Rita Marie. She was the first WWF female referee, and I believe the first female referee to be in the business. Now, Rita, alleged that No Chance in Hell sexually assaulted her. And everybody made a big joke out of it at the time and were saying, oh, this woman is just trying to go after this rich billionaire. In 2023, when the statute of limitations was temporarily lifted, there was a settlement given to Rita. Now, with scandals happening, the steroid trial happens, and there's a possibility that, Vince might go to jail because he could have, pled, guilty and, paid a little fine, but he was like, I'm not about to do that. Now, as all the scandals are going on, by the time they get to the steroids trial, Hulk Hogan has decided to leave the WWF. He told Vince he would never run against him. He's off doing movies and TV shows, but eventually gets swept up back into the business by Ted Turner and Eric Bischoff, and then eventually testifies against Vince in court to save his own behind. And now part 3 starts and it lets us know that this ain't the first screw job that has happened in the WWF. It's not. And I know y'all talk about this is the first one. No, baby, this ain't the first one. This is the Montreal screw job. Y'all know about the Wendy Richter screw job, okay? I know Big Bank Ted, Big Money Ted was around looking at these scandals like, when it's my time, I'm going to show up and show out. I am. Now, the steroids trial happens. He does not go to jail. Hulk Hogan does testify and got his immunity deal. But he lets it be known that no, he didn't tell me I need to take steroids. No, he didn't give them to me. No. I was taking them on my own, recreational, nothing more, nothing less. They tried to hit up the rest of the fellas, and the fellas was like, child, please. We was taking them long before we ever met this man. Now, yes, steroids was an issue, but he was not selling them. Now, ultimately, this made business drop. Okay, business was dropped down and getting its eagle on, girl. That's how bad business got. Now, he did try to make some shake, try to make something happen when he brought in Lex Luger, but it was not sticking like grits. Lex did not have the aura. He did not have the vibe. It wasn't giving what it's supposed to give. Now, Big Money Ted at this time is like, Eric, here go my checkbook, make some shake, because we about to compete. Now, Vince needed a change. Listen, Lex wasn't sticking like grits. We need to do something. Thus, we get into the new generation. This is Brad. This is Sean. But Sean, this is Sean of the current, not Sean of the past. This is Razor and Diesel, aka Scott and Kevin. And we had a few more people in the new generation, but these were all the key players in this particular moment. Now check this out. He tried to make the new generation happen. He really was. He was. But he was kind of still living in that Hulk Hogan era, but we were trying to get out of that Hulk Hogan era. And, Brett was like, I'm the guy to put here. Like, y'all not going to catch me in no room with no underage girl. I'm not drinking. I'm not smoking. I'm not doing no types of drugs. I do my job. I'm on the road. And I go home to my wife and my children. I'm a nice Canadian man. Don't play with me. At this time, Big Money Ted was like, Eric, what can we do to compete? Now, at this point, Eric is making big money moves. He already secured Hulk Hogan. He got Randy Savage and Slim Jim. Okay. And went and got Lex Luger. Now, Lex Luger didn't stick like grits over there in the WWF. Now, Eric was on the phone with Lex, and he was like, listen, what is it looking like over there? Lex is saying, I don't like it over here. It stink. And, my contract is up anyway. Okay, well, I'm going to sign you to a big money contract, but don't tell nobody. And I'm going to call you when I need you. You got me? I got you. Cool. Hang up. Boom. Done. The problem at this time is Vince was making handshake deals, thinking everybody was honorable to those handshake deals. But baby, how are people going to be honorable with handshake deals when they about to get guaranteed contracts, big money, no whammies? Vince did not see the signs. It was there, but he didn't really see it. Now, Big Money Ted said, Eric, what can we do to compete? Like, what can we do? Want to compete. Want to. And Eric let him know, listen, we not on Mondays, we's on Saturdays. And if we want to compete, we need to be on Monday. Big Money Ted said, bitch, bet. And told the people down to the TNT, because he missed the cable man. That's the man that's in charge of the cable. He told the people down to TNT, give Eric 2 hours on TNT at so-and-so time going live. Once again, he don't see the signs because things are moving in place behind him. Eric said, motherfucker, bet. Eric, every Monday, live on Nitro. Every Monday, live on Nitro. Was telling the finishes to what was happening down to Monday Night Raw because it had already happened. It had already been taped. The people was already talking about it. So don't turn your channel. Don't turn that dial if you still got one because this is where you need to be, here on Nitro. And like I said, he told Lex, don't tell nobody. I'm going to call you when I need you. Eric picked up that phone and said, hello, Lex, it's time. Lex said, bet, I'm there. And popped up on Nitro. And it's just like, ooh, messy. Once again, didn't see the signs, but is now surprised. And it's just like, oh my God, is he going to sweat or we're going to see him sweat? And he wasn't sweating for a while. He didn't let them see him sweat for a while. But at this moment, you better get to sweating because Alundra Blaze was on WCW live with the Women's World Wrestling Federation Championship, and she threw that bitch in the trash. She sure did. Plopped her right in the trash. And it was like, ooh, this is mess. My kind of mess. It ain't my mess, but I like to watch it. And now Mr. Neckbrace, no chance in hell is sweating. He is sweating. So then we get the Billionaire Ted skits. Now, listen. These Billionaire Ted skits was really campy. They was cute for what they was. And Billionaire Ted felt like, these is funny, okay? Making fun of me. Child, who they supposed to be? Hulk Hogan? Funny! Now, the Billionaire Ted skits didn't stick like grits. Why? Because, well, Kay down to the USA was like, we don't do that over here. I don't know where you do that at, but not over here on USA. She's also like friendly rivals with Ted Turner and TNT, so it's just like, we can't be doing that over here. So, yeah, Billionaire Ted skits ended, and they were also making fun of how much lithium Billionaire Ted, aka Mr. Cableman, aka Big Bank Ted, was taking. So it's just like, ooh, even into back then, y'all shouldn't have been doing that. Like, y'all shouldn't do that in today's time, but back then, y'all definitely shouldn't have been doing that. So at this point, WWF is really in trouble because they about to get into some more. The curtain call is born. What is the curtain call? Well, this is when, Scott and Kevin were leaving to go to WCW. Vince couldn't give them guaranteed contract. They wanted to stay, but they needed more money, and they were trying to look for less days. Kevin's about to become a father. Scott's already a father. We need more money for our children. Okay? So they head down to the WCW. They already signed their contract. This is the last match they got down there to the WWF. Now, Shawn was like, I want to do something to say goodbye to my friends. He talked to Vince. Vince said, is it important? He said, yes. So he said, we can make something happen. So they all go out there. The match happens, and they come out, and they hugging, and they doing, bowing in Madison Square Garden where somebody got a videotape. The videotape get out, broke kayfabe. They said this the day professional wrestling died, and now everybody pissed off. Now these two ain't gonna get in trouble because they're leaving. He's not gonna get in trouble because he's the champion. The only person to get in trouble was Triple H. Now he was supposed to become King of the Ring that year, but he fell all the way back down the ladder and had to work himself back up, and Vince told him, you're going to have to eat shit and like the taste of it. Now, they make their debut on WCW. Nobody can tell if it's real or fake. Nobody can tell if this is WWF invading WCW or if they're just like, we work here now. He loved that. Big Money Ted also enjoyed that. Vince got the whining about this entire situation, which is just like, come on now. Even the producers of the docuseries had to be like, well, you did the same thing to, the rest of the people down to the territories. And he was like, no, I was trying to compete. They're trying to put me out of business. Eric's trying to figure out what the problem is. Like, what's the problem? You did the same thing. Vince sues for his intellectual property, which I'm pretty sure I blanked out at the moment of suing for intellectual property as it pertains to the characters, because it was like, And once again, Big Money Ted is on top and winning. So Bash at the Beach happens, and they're talking about, we got a third man, we got a third man, we got a third man. Where the hell's the third man? We all know the third man is Hulk Hogan. This is when Hulk Hogan turns heel. He attacks Randy Savage. NWO is born, and thus we got the 83 weeks that Eric Bischoff has lived off of for centuries. I believe Eric Bischoff is a vampire. I'm going to just say that now. He has looked the same since I was a child. Anyway, Eric has the 83 weeks. 83 weeks is the 83 weeks that Nitro whooped Monday Night Raw's ass. And he enjoyed it and named his podcast after it. And I also felt like, Vince, I don't know why you're whining, because you did the same thing to Vern Gagne, the AWA, and many other people. This is a competition, baby. Get used to it. Now, money was a big factor in all this stuff happening, and Vince couldn't afford to pay a lot of people what they thought they were worth or what they were worth. And Brett was looking for more money in his contract. He would have stayed if they would have had, if the money was right. But Brett was leaving. Vince showed him the loopholes in his contract to get more money out of WCW, which he did, and he was heading there. The only problem is he was the champion. Which takes us back to Wendy Richter. She was the champion. Vince felt like she got too big for her britches, that she didn't want to do, a job for anybody. She didn't want to drop the title. He was ready to fire her, and he screwed her over in a match between her and Moolah. Moolah was dressed all in black and, rolled Wendy up in a schoolboy. Nobody told Wendy. And the ref counted 1, 2, 3, but Wendy had kicked out. Her shoulders were up. So Wendy walked out that night. Thus began the dilemma. What can Vince do? Because he can let Brett leave as champion, and Brett just didn't want to drop it in Canada. We can do it somewhere else. I still got 19 days on my contract. So Vince decides to pull another screw job, and he tells the timekeeper, ring the goddamn bell. Brett hears this and sees this. Brett spit on this man. All up in the facial. Now, certain people lied and said they didn't know about it, but like I said, Jim Cornette needs to be here to tell this story. Now it got so bad that, Brett destroyed the monitors down there on commentary. He also locked up with Vince in the locker room, ends up uppercutting Vince, and Black Eye gave that man a concussion and knocked him the hell out. And that was part 3. What y'all think? We'll be back with part 4. We're in this era at this point in the docuseries. Know that. We are in this era. Oh my god, what happened to your eye? Oh yeah, that's right. Brett was pissed. He spit in your face, he destroyed your monitors, and then when you came back there to either have a conversation with him or talk to him or just get hit like you knew he was going to try to do to you, you locked up with him in a wrestling hold, and then he uppercutted you, had you laid out like Starfish, gave you a concussion, and like, goddamn, baby, that eye is ugly. At this point in time, Brett is gone. Brett is down there to the WCW. But also at this time, Owen decided to stay. So, yeah, what was happening with Owen at that time is like, it's crazy. They were making fun of him like almost every week. It made no sense to me. Like, he was a top tier athlete. Like, Owen was that dude. Once again, we're still in this era. So, what is it giving? What are we about to get? A lot. It's a lot of mess that happened in this era. Now, him and this eye said his idol was Dr. Jerry Graham, and he wanted to dress like Jerry. He wanted to look like him. He wanted to talk like him. He idolized him. He had his stepmother dye his hair blonde like him. He hung out with Jerry, and Jerry was just as flamboyant and outrageous and outgoing and just grand, and that's who he wanted to be. It's just like, well, good for you. Once again, we're in this era. Now, after this situation, boy, did somebody think that they was going to babyface their way up out of this. And let's be clear on something. It was not Shawn. It was Vince. Vince thought he was going to babyface his way up out of here, but here's the problem with the situation. Everybody out in the world who was online at the time found out about what happened, as in the screw job. And they found out from his website messaging boards. They found out the behind the scenes tea that Vince had screwed over Brett. So every Monday following that, he's getting hissing and booing, and the people are booing him and trying to throw stuff at him and just not letting him talk. Like, he got it bad. Not had it bad, he got it badly. And he went on to do an interview with Jim Ross to say, Brett screwed Brett. And it's just like, ooh, that did not help. And then we're slowly getting Mr. McMahon. We are currently in this era of this docuseries. Get into it. Now, even though we are slowly starting to enter the Attitude Era in WWF and Mr. McMahon is about to be, the character has been born, but we really haven't seen the extent of him, Mr. 83 Weeks is living on that 83 weeks and he's riding high and he like, ain't nobody touching me. He's whooping ass at this point. Famous last words. So one night, a younger version of this man right here goes out in some Hoochie Daddy shorts. Really, it was biker shorts at the time, but we know them as Hoochie Daddy shorts. And he had stuffed the front with some gauze that he got from the trainers, and he was dropping it down, getting his eagle on, doing the absolute most. Vince in his eye calls him and tells him, you're unprofessional, you're this, you're that, and I'm fining you $10,000. This man must have a good talk game because he was able to talk himself out of that fine, allegedly. And was like, well, listen, come on now. Everybody loved it. Quit playing with me. Which, after this whole conversation, he goes on to do like a little, interview, press conference, whatever you want to call it, to tell the people, hey, we're about to change things about here. Writing, people, characters, people behind the scenes, people in front of the camera, everything about to change. Once again, Mr. 83 Weeks ain't worried about nothing because y'all not touching us. We all the way up. Nothing can stop us. We all the way up. Once again, famous last words. Now, at this time, this man right here is starting to, change everything. Everything is starting to become a feeder system to the WWF. And when I say everything, I mean like, WCW, ECW, and other promotions that are still going on are now becoming a feeder system into the WWF because they need new characters. And one of the new characters was Stone Cold Steve Austin. Now, before he was Stone Cold Steve Austin, he was Stunning Steve, and, he was everywhere. Okay, he was at the WCW. They fired him. Eric, Mr. 83 Weeks fired him. He was over there at ECW with Paul Heyman, and Paul Heyman realized the writing was on the wall, but I'm going to make sure I'm going to get my everything up out of this man before he leaves. Now, at this time, we all know that Triple H was supposed to win King of the Ring 1997, but he didn't end up winning because of the curtain call, so he fell back down and had to build himself back up. Now, Vince in his eye goes on to tell Stone Cold Steve Austin, you're winning King of the Ring. Know that. Point blank in the period. It's time for King of the Ring. I think he faced Mark Merrow in the first match and he got kicked, kicked so hard he busted his lip. He had to leave, go get stitches. He comes back and finds out that Jake the Snake Roberts is who he's facing in the finals, and Jake the Snake had just dropped a religious promo on him. So he wins, and then he, does his promo, and he was like, you was bumping them gums, but Austin 316 said, I just whooped your ass. And he continues to proceed with his promo and wraps it up with, and that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so, thus Stone Cold Steve Austin, the badass, is born. Now at this point, we are about to head deep down dirty south into this era. Now, they all said that Vince was easy to hate, and Vince said himself that, hey, I was able to create the character of Vince McMahon from, all the rich people who ever treated me wrong in life before he got his money up and everything. So that's how he created the character. Now, you had the anti-hero. He wasn't really a face, but he was a heel, but people liked him, so he was the anti-hero. Everybody liked one of them, a villain, a bad guy who, you kind of want to see him win, even though it's just like, we really rooting for him? Yes, because he's doing what a lot of people want to do and still want to do. They want to put hands on their boss. That's about it. Now, when asked what's the similarities between him and, No Chance in Hell, Mr. McMahon, he says, oh, there's no similarities. When you ask Shane what are the similarities, he says that No Chance in Hell is an extension of Vince McMahon, the man. When you ask Shawn Michaels what are the similarities, he was like, there are no differences between the two. There is a slim, slight chance of a difference, but that's not it. Hulk Hogan said they pretty damn similar. They about the same. And Stone Cold Steve Austin said it's just an extension of himself that is overhyped and, overindulged. Now, at this point, Mr. 83 Weeks said, Vince needs to just admit that he took our formula because we did it first, and he did it better. But we knew, they would come out on top of, eventually, but it meant that you stole my formula. Because I was the first bad guy, I did it. Vince in his eyes said, if that makes Eric feel better. Now, Eric, I'm going to say this. I don't know if you're the first bad guy to ever do it, but Eric made the fatal mistake of not working on new characters. You always need new characters. You need new people. And he relied on the people who were already there and never kind of just like tried to build anybody else up. And the NWO stuff was starting to run its course. And at this time, this one right here in his eye was creating new people all the time. Stone Cold Steve Austin, DX, a slew of people that's on this poster. Even The Undertaker went through some changes and he brought in new people. And The Rock. So he came in as Rocky Maivia. The people weren't really feeling him. They were screaming and chanting, die, Rocky, die. Eventually, he would join the Nation of Domination and cut a promo that's basically like, listen, it don't matter the color of my skin, but know this, you will respect me. It's about respect at the end of the day. Now, he eventually becomes the first, world heavyweight champion to be a person of color. And, he tells Vince that, and Vince was like, okay. Because at the end of the day, it really don't matter to Vince. And when I say it does not matter, it means that when it came down to it, everybody on there was like, it didn't matter what you looked like. Okay, as long as you knew how to draw money and could bring big money, big bucks, no whammies. Okay, big money, big money, big money to him. He had a problem with y'all. He had a problem. At this point in time, a lot is going on. We're deep into the Attitude Era. They are doing the most. Some things y'all shouldn't have done, like blackface. Yeah, can't get with that. No, 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 no. Women are being objectified. It's giving misogyny noir all up and through there. We getting real risque, and it's basically, mirroring the times we're in. Girls going wild, MTV Beach House, everybody being at raves. People are just having attitude, and that's what they were trying to mirror, because art imitates life and life imitates art, and that's what was happening here. Also, the parents felt the way because their children was going to school saying suck it and doing the most and jumping off everything, but it was just like a lot of people said, well, raise your damn kids. If you don't like it, turn it off. That's what was happening. Now, quite possibly the saddest thing that happened in this docuseries was to talk about Owen and his accident. Brett felt like Owen, stayed in the WWF, and Owen probably thought he was mad at him, but he wasn't. But he also didn't like the way they were treating him in the WWF, and it was really like Owen was being made fun of almost every single week. Owen became the Blue Blaze. Now, Vince was like, that just shows how much of a big ego Brett had, because nobody was doing anything to Owen. We were trying to make him a star, and it was like, it was not giving that. Owen became the Blue Blazer, and he was supposed to be coming down from the ceiling into the ring. And, the equipment malfunctioned. It was not up to par, and he came down, and it was a fatal accident. Now, his blood was still in the ring, and, they wheeled him out. They took him to the hospital, but they continued the pay-per-view, which was stupid in my opinion. And Vince said, if it was me or my son, I would have continued, which was not great. Martha sued, WWE and got her settlement, but this was sad, truly. It was an accident, but it was sad. And that was part 4. At this point of the documentary, we're in part 5, and let me tell you something. Part 5 is all about the family and the fact that real life tends to bleed into everything he touches. Now, Mr. 83 Weeks, he did beat you, okay? The Attitude Era was whooping up on you, and honestly, Mr. 83 Weeks says, well, it was the AOL time, Ted Turner, Time Warner, that merge that caused all the issues, and all the new executives didn't want wrestling. But if you let everybody else tell it, the product was not good. It had faltered. You even yourself have said that too. Now, Big Money Ted Turner, he eventually sold WCW to Vince for 2.5 million. He did. And Vince was like, "Oh yeah, you said you were going to crush the, everything, but it didn't happen." And then this is how we get the whole crossover. Nitro premieres on TNT /show, and WWF at the time premiered on USA while they were in Cleveland. Nitro was in Panama City, and Vince was on both shows, and all that stuff. So, I mean, it was a time to be around for TV because it was like, oh my God, what is happening here? Oh my God, what happened to your eye? Anyway, I know what happened to that eye. I remember. So we see them talking about him investing in the XFL, them taking the company public, opening bars and restaurants and casinos, and just really, trying to do a big one. Well, the XFL failed horribly. It was too much WWF, not enough real good football, and the people was like, I don't like it. Now, that first episode, oh yeah, it was great, but the rest of the ratings, they faltered. So at this point, Vince ain't doing no, nepotism. No nepotism over here. So everybody got to start from the bottom and work their way up to the top if you really want to do this. So Shane started from the bottom and, made his way up to the top. And the same for Stephanie. No nepotism was given to any of the children. You got to work from the bottom up if you want to get up here. So, all these things were happening. The family was getting brought in. Now, Mr. My Eye talked about, his abuse. Like, really didn't go into deep to it, but really just talked about the abuse he faced as a child growing up with his mom and his stepfather. And it wasn't just abuse from the stepfather, it was abuse from his mom in a way that you're not, allegedly, that you're not supposed to, as a parent or an adult, do with a child. That's just no. Whew. But Vince goes on to say, I didn't take my abuse that I faced as a reason to go off and abuse other people like some people do. I think that's a cop out. If something bad has happened to you, you take it and you throw it away. Now, here's the issue. He said all of that, and then they proceeded to play different clips of him basically acting out forms of abuse against different people down to the shows that they were putting on. Yeah. Yeah, what, not great, especially what this last part's about to be about. Not great, not great, not a great talking point, not whatsoever. Now, with the family being there, we all know how Triple H and Stephanie got pushed together. We already heard this story. So basically, they asked Stephanie, was there anything weird that, you thought your father asked you to do? Was it weird to you? And she was like, yeah. Was there anything she said no to? Yes. When her and Paul, because that's what they call this man now, I know him as a Triple H, were getting married, like their real life, like getting married, their real life married, Vince wanted to do the wedding on pay-per-view, and she said no. And eventually, based off what Triple H told us, he called Stephanie selfish. And then, 6 days before her actual wedding, there was the Vince versus Stephanie street fight. Yeah. And Linda threatened to, leave him if she showed up with a black eye or a broken ankle or anything like that. But she was choked out in that match. Yeah. Now, the fans tended to love Shane and Stephanie as heels, as baby faces, whatever you wanted to create them as. And, eventually we got to see Linda. Now, Mr. My Eye talks about Linda being a boss. Everybody knew him as the big boss, and then Linda as the second boss. Linda was CEO. You didn't really hear about that until they brought her on to, television at the time. So then he talks about how him and Linda met. His mom, introduced him and Linda when he was 16. He loved her family dynamic. She came from a, middle class family, like both parents worked. It was not the dysfunction he was used to growing up in. So he actually enjoyed her family. They got married when she was 17, so they got married young, and he had promised to always love her and to never have a dull moment. And then we get different clips over, the course of the years of Linda popping up on TV, her kicking people in the groin, her getting slapped, the whole 9 yards. So they talk about in the documentary the Trish and Vince storyline where they're supposed to be having this affair, and how Linda was instrumental in helping with the storyline moving along. She suggested some things, like for Trish to kiss her forehead when they did the vignette of them on Valentine's Day and all that stuff. Now we also get into the whole get on all fours and bark like a dog situation, which was, oh my God, so degrading. So degrading. And all the people who were in the arena that night were cheering and chanting and loving this, the men. And it was giving very much, y'all are podcast bros, y'all are red pill men, y'all supposed to be these alpha males, whatever. Y'all are enjoying this because this woman, a very beautiful woman that you would maybe never be able to get, you love to see them humiliated because they would never give you the time of day. So this all paid off at WrestleMania when it was Shane versus Vince to defend his mother, who at the time was, being incapacitated by some rugs. Yeah. And Shane won, it paid off for Trish too because she turned on Vince at WrestleMania. So boom, we get into a slew of other things. We get into Sable leaving the WWF and suing him for sexual harassment and a slew of other things and $110 million. Eventually, they bring her back as a whole storyline. They work it into there, and everybody's like, listen, even if you piss him off, even if you make him mad, even if you poke the bear, even if y'all have had a falling out, if there's money to be made and he thinks he can make money with you, he's going to bring you back no matter what. We saw that with Hulk Hogan. We saw that with Ric Flair, Sable, Scott, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, Eric Bischoff. There's been a lot of people who have been brought back for him to, make, because he thinks he can make money off of them. So there was that. Being honest, this is truly more focused on, the relationship as we get to inching closer to the end of this part with between him and Shane. So Shane talks about back to that WrestleMania match they had that, when he was a kid, him and his father were wrestling and his dad grabbed his rib meat and like twisted it like hard. And then when he said ouch and like, oh, he pulled his hair back and he was like, you cheated. You can't do that. And Vince told him, sometimes you got to cheat to win. And I cheat to win. Know that. So they talk about how nobody really knows like the inner workings of the McMahon family relationship. We just know what they show us and we just go off of that. So Paul Heyman goes on to tell, a moment about how Shane had this idea and he told Vince about it. He was very adamant about it, and Vince told him no. And Shane was really fighting for it, and he took a knife and gave it to Shane and said, you're going to have to kill me in order for that to happen. Like if you want that to happen, you're going to have to take me out, and if you don't, then I know what type of man you are, and if you do, you better get ready to do what needs to be done to make sure this company stays successful. And if you don't do any of those other things, then you need to buy me out and be ready to either get rid of me like I would have gotten rid of my father had he gotten in my way when I bought him out. So it's just like, ooh, family dynamics. Very shaky, very shifty, very a mess. And then they talk about, storylines that some people said no to. And they asked Stephanie, were there storylines that you said no to? And she was like, there were some, but, one I'm not going to talk about. And Vince talks about it anyway. He says, there was a storyline where, I suggested that Mr. McMahon, the character, possibly gotten Stephanie pregnant. That was definitely going to be a hell no. Don't ever do that. Never suggest that. What's wrong with you? The Attitude Era is over. The WWF is no more. It's now WWE because the World Wildlife Fund was like, listen, we've had the name before you. There was a lawsuit. It was a lot. Y'all go look it up. Stone Cold leaves due to not liking what's happening with his character in the product. The Rock leaves to start his movie career, and thus is born the Ruthless Aggression era, where we get John Cena, DX, and Shawn Michaels coming back, Batista, The Undertaker, Randy Orton, Rey Mysterio, all these great people. Now, on the guise of saying no to certain, creative things, a lot of people felt like, you get punished for it. We get back into the family dynamics of it all. So Shane thought, buying the UFC would be a great business model, would be a great investment, which it would have been if they did so. But, Vince wasn't having it. He didn't think so. So he was like, you can invest, but he didn't have the money to do so. And eventually, Shane, after so many years, just, left to go make it on his own and find out his own thing because it was not looking like it was going to happen at, the family company. Now, that was part 5. Part 6 is going to be a mess. Oh, now we into the messy ass shit of this entire thing. I thought, parts 1 through 5 was messy, but part 6 is messy. Right now, we're still in the era of ruthless aggression. Not about to fuck up my voice for nobody. Oh my god, what happened to your eye? We all know what happened to his eye. So at this point, we are like, we don't have Stone Cold Steve Austin no more. We don't have The Rock anymore. What can we do? We are making stars, but it's just like, it's not sticking like grits for some people. So you know what he decided to do? I'll tell you what he decided to do. Picture it. WWE 2007. He called up on the Orange Man and was like, listen, let's do something down there to the WrestleMania. Battle of the Billionaires. Okay? Let's do that. And then the Orange Man came, everybody praising him because it was like we don't know if his persona in wrestling was just him or he was put on. And then he took this wrestling personification and took it out there and became, somebody's president of the US of A. Yeah. And we remember. Now I know everybody remembers this era of Vincent Kennedy, No Chance in Hell McMahon. Never shave your head again. You don't have the head shape for it. Now, at some point in time around the 2007 era, Mr. Ow, my eye had the bright idea with him and a slew of other people to do a who done it, as in who unalive Mr. McMahon. I remember watching this live. He cuts his promo. He then goes out to the limo, takes a pause, gets in, and then the limo goes completely. And it's just like, oh my God, who did it? What happened? But you know what? That didn't even really get the finish out because why? Now I know y'all are wondering, well, why didn't the storyline finish out? Because everyone got the news that Chris Benoit, his wife Nancy, and their son Daniel had passed away. So they do what they normally do for a wrestler who has passed away. They do, a tribute show. You get the 10 bells, and we continue on. However, during the show, the news came out that this wasn't an accident. Nobody did anything to them, unless you believe conspiracy theories. That this was a unaliving suicide. He unalived his wife and his son, and then committed suicide. Yeah. Now, Vincent Kennedy, No Chance in Hell, Potato Head McMahon said, Crispin was a monster and a slew of other things, and that just didn't sit right. Who didn't it sit right with? Christopher Nowinski. Now, Christopher Nowinski was a professional wrestler from '01 to '03. He retired, he got a bad concussion, and, it was career ending. At that time, the people just really ate him up because it was like, you got a concussion? Weak. That's how he was presented. Now, he was a fan of Chris Benoit, and he's also a neuroscientist. So he got to studying CTE. He got on the phone with Chris Benoit's dad and was like, I want to study his brain. Because typically you could only study CTE after the person passes away. This is a normal brain. This is a brain with CTE. This is a normal brain. This is a brain with CTE. This brain hasn't had multiple injuries to their head. This brain has. Now, Mr. Potato Head did not believe in CTE, and he felt like Christopher Nowinski was just, trying to make excuses for Chris Benoit, and he didn't believe in it. And then eventually, after multiple instances of bad press when it surrounded not only the Chris Benoit situation, but a slew of wrestlers passing away before they even hit 45, he decided, to invest in, Chris and with the research and everything. And eventually we got the concussion protocol. Now, Mr. No Chance in Hell, when they talked about the wrestlers who passed away before they were 45, he was like, oh, they were using drugs for recreation because they wanted to, and da 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 da. And then you were mixing uppers and downers, and then you don't know what your body doesn't know what to do. Well, first and foremost, you shouldn't be mixing uppers and downers, no way. But also, just say no. On top of the fact that it was a very like blanket nasty statement because a lot of these people weren't using drugs for recreational use. It may have gotten to that point, but they were self-medicating because they were in pain. Check out the Kurt Angle documentary. So what was the outcome of all this bad press they were getting from Chris Benoit and the unaliving suicide and the wrestlers passing away before they were 45 due to, different types of things that were going on? Well, you got the concussion protocol, like I mentioned, you got a better wellness policy, and also WWE started to pay for rehab for active wrestlers and wrestlers who were no longer with the company but had once been with the company, on top of the schedule getting better. Now, the schedule used to be 10 days on, 3 days off, and then it went to 4 days on and 3 days off, and now it's better for everybody, or so I've heard. Now, we skip all the way to WrestleMania 30, right? And the streak is a thing. Streak is the biggest thing ever. It's the thing that it's just like we want to see it. We got to see it. You got to be there to see if the streak is going to be broken, but you love the fact that it's not. Well, Mr. Potato Head walked in Undertaker's dressing room right before the match happened. It was like, we're going to put Brock over. I don't know why that needed to be a thing. He was already over, but go ahead, Miss Girl, I guess. Well, Undertaker lets us know the match went on for 25 minutes, and hey, I got a concussion. I don't remember nothing that happened in that match, okay? I don't remember nothing. He says, I don't believe he got hurt. He was just probably upset and didn't want to remember, his streak being broken. Uh-huh. Now, The Undertaker did let us know that he went to the hospital and, Vince left WrestleMania to come console, his wife, which is Michelle McCool, and that over his time, he's had 18 surgeries. He walks with a limp now, and some days he can't get out of bed, but he would still be going if he could go. He would still be out there wrestling with the best of them if he still could. Now, Codarius Homelander Rhodes, he get his little moment in the, docu-series, and he's like, listen, when I came in, it was 2007. We was coming off of what happened with Chris Benoit, and it was very clean. We had the wellness policy and all these things, so it was clean on screen and clean off screen. Why? It was very clean because we entered into the TVPG era, and a lot of the times I wanted them to pack this bullshit up. Pack it up. Send it back to where it came from. Because, don't like it, don't want it. It really turned super cartoonish. Some things were great, some things weren't. The women also weren't getting enough time to shine. Their matches were called the popcorn matches. Now, during this time, we still had like evening gown and, stuff like that. But the girls were like really out there wrestling, but they weren't giving the opportunity. And then came my fave. Okay, she was cutting promos on people, she was cutting promos on management and higher ups, and she was doing the damn thing. And she's one of the all-time greats. Okay, get into AJ Lee. We love her. We want her back. We want Pepsi Phil to convince her to come back, but it's her choice, and we don't push people. Now, credit can be given to also Stephanie McMahon and her husband, Triple H. I don't know that man like that to call him by his government, but coupled with AJ Lee and Stephanie and the people on Twitter, pushing for Divas to be given a chance, the girls got a chance. And the Divas Revolution was televised, and we got Evolution. Now, eventually, I would love to see this run back again with the women we have currently and, bring some of the girls back from the past, but that's just no, my opinion. Now, we all remember the authority aspect of what was happening in WWE in the 2010s. So, boom, Shane comes back, and it's just like, okay, you want to run Monday Night Raw? You're going against, Undertaker at WrestleMania, and it's just like listening to Shane and everything that they've talked about, and everybody is talking about Shane, and it's just like imagine putting your body on the line day in and day out to get your dad's respect. Couldn't be me. Also, everybody knew that Shane probably wouldn't take over the company because Shane was too nice. Now, no one's saying that Stephanie is not nice, but it was like you can't take advantage of Stephanie. Everybody always thought because he was too nice, you could. Now, eventually in the 2019 era, AEW launched with Codarius Homelander Rhodes as a VP and a talent with the rest of his crew. Now, eventually we know Codarius Homelander Rhodes is going to come back to the WWE, and he is currently the undisputed Universal Champion, and I was cheering for him at WrestleMania, but I still acknowledge my tribal chief, the OTC. Now, the question I have after finishing this docuseries is, was Vince right that no one actually knew him at all? That is a question that I have. Now, Bruce Pritchard gets asked what's missing from this docuseries, and Bruce is like, this feels more of like a hit piece. Where's the human side of him? I know the human event, the man who paid for my wife's cancer treatments when she was only given 4 years to live, and that was 20 years ago, and he paid for the best of the best, and she's still here. Now, 2022, 2023, and 2024, he's taken hit after hit after hit, allegations of misconduct, payoffs, harassment, assault. All of these are coming out, and he steps down, comes back, steps down, comes back, retires, then comes back. And then at the top of 2024, Janelle Grant's lawsuit is filed and made public. I remember listening to someone read those documents and my mind was blown. And eventually he's asked to leave and he steps down and then eventually sells his shares. And it was like, well, what happens to WWE now that he's gone? They're still thriving. And, everyone gets asked, what is his legacy? And no one can truly answer that question. And he says, I don't have a legacy. And Tony Atlas says, the best wrestling promoter. And I'm like, is that real? Like, what is his legacy after this? Does he have one?